The middle class, long seen as the cornerstone of financial security and opportunity, is quietly fading. Rising costs, shrinking paychecks, and growing inequalities are reshaping what it means to be middle class, leaving many families struggling to hold on to their standard of living. This isn't just a story about numbers. It's about real lives and the challenges of navigating today's economy. Let's uncover why the middle class is disappearing and how economic shifts are making it harder to stay afloat. Number one, wages aren't keeping pace. One of the biggest struggles for the middle class is stagnant wages. While workers are more productive than ever, their paychecks haven't kept up. Over time, this gap has left families feeling like they're running faster but falling behind financially. For example, worker productivity has increased by over 60% in recent decades, but wages for the average worker have grown by less than 20%. This disparity leaves middle-class families grappling with financial insecurity. Take the federal minimum wage in the U.S., which remains at $7.25 per hour, a figure unchanged since 2009. When adjusted for inflation, this amount has less purchasing power than it did over a decade ago, meaning workers earn less today in real terms than they did years ago. Number two, housing costs are unmanageable. Housing has become one of the clearest indicators of middle-class struggles. What was once an attainable goal, owning a home, is now out of reach for many. In the current market, the median home price in the U.S. exceeds $400,000, compared to just over $100,000 in the early 1990s. Even renting has become a financial challenge, with the average monthly rent in major cities now surpassing $2,000. These rising costs force families to allocate more than 30% of their income to housing, leaving little for savings or other expenses. This burden is particularly harsh for young families and first-time buyers, who face mounting competition from institutional investors buying up properties for profit. Number three, healthcare costs are consuming budgets. Healthcare costs have soared over the years, eating into middle-class incomes. In the U.S., the average annual cost of healthcare per person now exceeds $12,500, compared to just over $5,000 two decades ago. Even families with employer-sponsored insurance face steep deductibles and co-pays. A routine doctor's visit can cost hundreds of dollars, while a hospital stay for a minor procedure can leave families with bills in the thousands. These unexpected costs often force families to dip into savings or take on debt, pushing financial stability further out of reach. Number four, inflation is eating away at purchasing power. Inflation has quietly eroded the purchasing power of middle-class families. Everyday items like groceries, gas, and utilities have all become more expensive, forcing families to stretch their budgets further than ever before. Consider this. The price of a dozen eggs, once around $1.50, now regularly exceeds $4.50 in many areas. Gas prices, while slightly lower than recent peaks, still hover near $3.80 per gallon on average. Utilities, including electricity and heating, have seen steady increases, particularly in regions with colder climates. These rising costs leave less money for discretionary spending, forcing families to prioritize necessities over savings or leisure. Number five, education costs are skyrocketing. Education, often considered the pathway to a better life, has become a financial burden for many middle-class families. Public university tuition now averages over $10,000 per year, compared to just a few $1,000s in the 1980s. This increase has driven student loan debt in the U.S. to over $1.7 trillion. The average borrower owes more than $37,000, a figure that delays major life milestones like buying a home or starting a family. Parents often find themselves tapping into retirement savings or taking on additional debt to fund their children's education, compounding their financial challenges. Number six, job instability is increasing. The traditional middle-class job offering stability and benefits is becoming increasingly rare. Today, many workers rely on gig work, freelance roles, or short-term contracts that lack the security of full-time employment. Gig workers, such as rideshare drivers or delivery personnel, often earn less than minimum wage once expenses like gas and vehicle maintenance are factored in. They're also responsible for their own healthcare and retirement savings, making long-term financial planning difficult. This instability leaves many middle-class families vulnerable to unexpected expenses, with little room to build a financial safety net. Number seven, the growing wealth gap. The wealth gap between the rich and the middle class has widened significantly over the years. In the US, the top 1% now control over 34% of the nation's wealth. While the share held by the middle class has steadily declined, for example, the stock market, a major driver of wealth, primarily benefits the wealthy who can afford to invest. Middle-class families, on the other hand, often struggle to save for emergencies, let alone invest in assets that grow over time. This disparity leaves the middle class at a disadvantage, unable to close the gap. Number 8. Debt is becoming a way of life. For many middle-class families, debt has become a necessary part of everyday life. Credit card balances in the US recently surpassed $1 trillion, with the average household carrying over $6,000 in credit card debt. High interest rates, often exceeding 20%, make it difficult for families to pay off these balances, leading to a cycle of financial dependence. Meanwhile, personal loans and payday advances, often used to cover emergency expenses, further exacerbate the problem. Number 9. Lifestyle inflation hurts financial stability. Even when middle-class families experience income growth, lifestyle inflation, the tendency to spend more as you earn more, often cancels out those gains. For instance, upgrading to a larger home, leasing a more expensive car, or taking luxurious vacations